Draco Malfoy is often remembered as the sneering bully of Hogwarts, the arrogant Slytherin who made Harry's life miserable from day one. But beneath the platinum hair and sharp tongue was a frightened boy shaped by expectations he never chose. His cruelty was loud, but his fear was silent. And silence is where tragedy begins. From the moment he stepped onto the Hogwarts Express, Draco had already been molded into a weapon. He did not enter school to discover who he was, he arrived already told who he must be. His identity was inherited, not built. And that is the first sadness of his life. Unlike Harry, who fought darkness by choice, Draco was born inside it. The Malfoy name carried pride, wealth, and pure-blood supremacy, but it also carried chains. Every smile he forced, every insult he delivered, was part of a role written long before he understood right from wrong. When Voldemort rose again, Draco was no longer just a school rival. He became a pawn in a deadly political war. A child asked to do a monster's work. And that is where his arrogance began to crack. Draco Malfoy's story is not about heroism. It is about pressure. It is about inherited hatred. It is about a boy collapsing under the weight of a legacy he did not earn but was forced to protect. And that is why his story hurts. 1. He was raised to hate before he could think. Draco Malfoy was not born prejudiced, he was conditioned into it long before he understood the meaning of the words he spoke. Inside Malfoy Manor, pure-blood superiority was not a debate but a doctrine, repeated at dinner tables and reinforced through generations. As a child, Draco would have watched his father speak with disdain about Muggle-borns, absorbing that tone before he could question it. When hatred is wrapped in elegance and presented as tradition, it feels like pride rather than cruelty. He learned that power equaled purity and that compassion toward lesser bloodlines was weakness. No one sat him down and said, "This is wrong." Instead, they said, "This is who we are." That distinction is tragic. Children build their morality from their parents' approval. Draco's approval came when he repeated the right insults. He was rewarded for sneering. He was praised for arrogance. Slowly, prejudice became part of his identity. By the time he boarded the Hogwarts Express, those beliefs felt like facts. When he rejected Ron for being poor and Hermione for being Muggle-born, he was reenacting what he had seen modeled at home. He wasn't inventing cruelty, he was performing it. And performances repeated long enough begin to feel real. The saddest part is that Draco likely never experienced meaningful diversity in his early years. His world was insulated, wealthy, and ideologically narrow. Without exposure to kindness from those he was taught to despise, how could he challenge the narrative? His insults were shields protecting inherited fear. Deep down, children want belonging. Draco's belonging depended on loyalty to a belief system that thrived on exclusion. To question blood purity would have meant questioning his father. To question his father would have meant destabilizing his entire foundation. That is too much for a child. Hatred became his language before empathy had a chance. 2. He lived under constant parental expectation. Being a Malfoy was not simply a surname, it was an obligation. Lucius Malfoy did not raise Draco to explore the world freely but to represent family prestige flawlessly. From a young age, Draco would have understood that his behavior reflected directly on generations of legacy. Mistakes were not private, they were humiliations. Praise was conditional, tied to achievement and loyalty. There is immense pressure in being someone's pride project. Draco likely learned that affection followed success, not vulnerability. He could not admit fear because fear suggested weakness. He could not admit doubt because doubt suggested betrayal. Under Lucius's watchful eye, excellence was expected, not celebrated. Even Draco's entrance into Slytherin would have been anticipated, as though deviation were impossible. Imagine growing up knowing that your path was pre-written. Individual desires become secondary to family ambition. When Draco boasted about his father's influence at Hogwarts, it was not just arrogance, it was reassurance. He was reminding himself that he belonged to something powerful. Children under immense expectation often construct inflated personas to hide insecurity. Draco's superiority complex may have been compensation for constant evaluation. If he failed academically or socially, he would not simply disappoint himself but tarnish a dynasty. That is an unbearable weight for a teenager. Lucius's involvement with Voldemort added another layer of pressure. Loyalty to the Dark Lord was framed as noble commitment. Draco inherited not just status but dangerous alliances. He had to be worthy of both his father and a rising tyrant. That double expectation left no room for softness. Even affection from his mother, Narcissa, while protective, existed within the same ideological bubble. Draco was loved, but he was also molded. He was not encouraged to become himself, he was shaped to become Malfoy. 3. His identity was built on superiority. Draco Malfoy's sense of self was constructed almost entirely on the belief that he was better than others. From childhood, he was taught that his bloodline placed him above most of the wizarding world. That superiority was not presented as arrogance but as fact. When identity is built on comparison, it becomes fragile. Draco didn't learn who he was independently, he learned who he was in contrast to others. He was superior because others were inferior. Remove the hierarchy, and his identity would collapse. That is why he clung so tightly to status. His sneers at Hermione and Ron were not random cruelty, they were reinforcement rituals. Every insult was a reminder to himself of where he stood. Superiority gave him security. It created the illusion of control. But superiority based on blood is hollow. It is not earned through effort or virtue. It requires constant defense. At Hogwarts, Draco encountered students who challenged that narrative. Hermione outperformed him academically. Harry gained admiration without elitism. Ron, despite poverty, had loyalty and warmth Draco lacked. These contradictions threatened his identity. Instead of adapting, Draco doubled down. Pride became armor. Arrogance became performance. But armor is heavy. When your worth depends on always being above someone else, you live in fear of falling. Draco's insecurity was disguised as confidence. You can hear it in the way he name-drops his father. You can see it in how desperately he wants recognition. If he were truly secure, he would not need constant validation. His identity was not built on internal strength but external hierarchy. And when Voldemort returned, that hierarchy shifted. Suddenly, pureblood status did not guarantee safety. Power belonged to the Dark Lord alone. Draco's constructed identity began to fracture. Without superiority, who was he? That silent question haunted him. 4. He envied Harry more than he hated him. Draco's rivalry with Harry was never just about dislike, it was about something deeper and more complicated. When they first met, Draco attempted friendship. He offered Harry an alliance based on status and influence. Harry rejected him. That rejection was more than social dismissal, it was symbolic. Harry had the very thing Draco was raised to value, pure blood status and fame, yet he rejected elitism. That defiance likely unsettled Draco. Harry was admired without cruelty. He was respected without fear. He formed friendships across bloodlines effortlessly. Draco watched as teachers protected Harry and students celebrated him. Envy is painful because it reveals what we lack. Draco envied Harry's freedom. Harry chose Gryffindor. Draco's house was expected. Harry chose his friends. Draco inherited his. Harry questioned authority when necessary. Draco obeyed it. The contrast was glaring. Draco's insults toward Harry often sounded like attempts to diminish him. When you cannot possess what someone has, you try to devalue it. Calling Harry reckless or attention-seeking may have been Draco's way of reducing the sting of comparison. But deep down, he must have recognized Harry's authenticity. Harry was brave without performance. Draco's bravery, in contrast, was mostly theatrical. The jealousy grew stronger as Harry repeatedly defied Voldemort. Draco saw someone his own age resisting the darkness that he himself felt trapped inside. That must have been infuriating and confusing. It is easier to hate someone than to admit you admire their courage. Envy can rot into bitterness if unaddressed. Draco chose bitterness. But the intensity of his fixation on Harry suggests something more than simple rivalry. It suggests longing for autonomy, for respect without fear, for moral clarity. Draco hated Harry because Harry embodied the freedom Draco did not have. And that realization is profoundly sad. 5. He was marked by Voldemort at 16. At 16, most teenagers worry about exams, friendships, and identity. Draco Malfoy was given the dark mark. That mark was not an honor, it was a threat disguised as privilege. Voldemort did not choose Draco out of admiration but out of punishment toward Lucius. The task assigned to him, killing Dumbledore, was nearly impossible. It was designed to test loyalty through terror. Imagine being a teenager tasked with assassination under the watch of the most feared wizard alive. Failure meant death. Success meant moral damnation. There was no safe outcome. The dark mark burned on his skin as a constant reminder of expectation. It was both branding and imprisonment. Draco's childhood effectively ended the moment he accepted it. He could not confide in teachers. He could not confide in friends. Even his parents were powerless to fully protect him. The bravado he displayed early in the year quickly dissolved. He became pale, withdrawn, anxious. The weight of murder pressed on someone who had barely learned to drive a broomstick. Voldemort exploited Draco's fear and pride. By elevating him publicly, he isolated him privately. Draco's mission was not simply about killing Dumbledore, it was about proving worth to a tyrant. That is a horrific burden. Children should not be weapons. Yet Draco was weaponized by ideology and intimidation. Every failed attempt, the cursed necklace, the poisoned mead, deepened his panic. He was spiraling. Sleep likely became difficult. Paranoia became constant. He was living in dread of consequences. The mark symbolized belonging to darkness, but Draco wore it like a countdown clock. It represented how little control he truly had. And the tragedy lies in how young he was when all of this happened. 6. He was terrified during the Half-Blood Prince year. In Half-Blood Prince, we see Draco unravel. The confident bully is replaced by a trembling boy haunted by impossible responsibility. His isolation becomes noticeable. He distances himself even from Crabbe and Goyle emotionally. He spends hours alone in the room of requirement, obsessively trying to fix the vanishing cabinet. Obsession often masks fear. He was not calm, he was desperate. The scene in the bathroom with moaning Myrtle reveals the truth. Draco cries. He admits he cannot do it. He confesses fear of what will happen if he fails. This is not theatrical villainy. This is psychological collapse. He looks sickly throughout the year. His hands shake. His temper flares unpredictably. Anxiety replaces arrogance. Living under constant threat erodes stability. He is both hunter and hunted. Voldemort expects results. Dumbledore quietly observes. The walls are closing in. The boy who once mocked others is now drowning in dread. He cannot ask for help because that would be betrayal. He cannot back out because that would be suicide. The pressure isolates him further. Myrtle becomes his only accidental confidant because she cannot report him. That detail is heartbreaking. A ghost becomes safer than living allies. Draco's fear humanizes him profoundly. We witness the cost of ideological extremism on youth. His face in those scenes is not cruel but exhausted. He is living inside a trap he helped build. And fear, when prolonged, reshapes personality. By the time he stands atop the astronomy tower, he is barely holding himself together. 7. He couldn't kill Dumbledore. When Draco corners Dumbledore on the astronomy tower, everything builds to that moment. The wand is raised. The mission is within reach. This is the climax of his assigned destiny. And yet he hesitates. That hesitation is everything. Dumbledore does not fight back. He speaks calmly. He offers protection. He acknowledges Draco's fear. In that stillness, Draco's mask cracks completely. Killing in theory is different from killing in reality. Draco was raised to admire power, not to execute helpless people. His hand trembles. His voice shakes. Tears fill his eyes. He lowers his wand emotionally before he lowers it physically. That moment proves he is not irredeemably evil. He does not lack conscience, he lacks courage to defy expectation fully. The tragedy lies in his paralysis. He is trapped between fear of Voldemort and resistance to murder. It is a psychological battlefield. He is a boy forced into a decision no adult should demand. When Snape ultimately casts the killing curse, Draco does not protest. He is relieved and horrified simultaneously. Relief because the burden is lifted. Horror because he knows what just happened. That moment will haunt him. He was willing enough to try, but not strong enough to refuse outright. That gray space is painful. It shows moral conflict rather than moral emptiness. Draco failed as an assassin, but perhaps succeeded in preserving the last fragment of his soul. And that fragile resistance is deeply tragic. 8. He was forced to watch his family fall. The Malfoys once stood among the most influential pureblood families. Their wealth and connections ensured security. But when Voldemort rose to full power, their status shifted. Malfoy Manor became headquarters for terror. Instead of hosts, they became subordinates. Lucius lost favor. Narcissa lived in fear. Draco witnessed his father's humiliation. That reversal is destabilizing. The man who once commanded respect now avoided eye contact with Voldemort. Draco saw that loyalty did not guarantee protection. Fear permeated their home. Dinner tables likely fell silent under tension. Voldemort's presence turned luxury into prison. Draco could not escape the consequences of his family's allegiance. He saw prisoners brought into his house. He saw torture occur within his walls. That proximity to violence changes a person. His childhood home became a symbol of dread. The security he once bragged about evaporated. Instead of pride, there was survival. Narcissa's desperation to protect Draco reveals how fragile their situation became. The Malfoys were no longer strategists, they were pawns. Draco likely felt guilt and resentment intertwined. Their ideology had led them here. The grandeur of pureblood superiority now meant kneeling before a tyrant. Watching a family collapse from within is traumatic. Especially when you were raised to believe that family was untouchable. Draco's world cracked open. The illusion of control shattered. And what remained was fear inside a mansion that once symbolized dominance. 9. He lost his childhood early. Childhood is meant to be a time of discovery, mistakes, and gradual growth. Draco's adolescence accelerated into crisis. By 6th year, he was planning murder. That shift is violent in its abruptness. While classmates stressed over Quidditch matches and OWLs, Draco stressed over assassination attempts. Innocence cannot survive that environment. He had to mature in the worst way possible, through fear. His worldview narrowed into survival calculations. The simplicity of school rivalry transformed into life-or-death stakes. He could no longer indulge in petty bullying without consequence. Reality intruded harshly. Nightmares likely replaced childish fantasies. His emotional development stalled under trauma. When teenagers face extreme pressure, parts of them freeze. Draco's humor faded. His arrogance became brittle. The carefree privilege of early years dissolved. Even after the war, he could never reclaim that lost time. Trauma ages people internally. He crossed lines too early. He saw too much too soon. The dark mark marked not just allegiance but stolen youth. His peers who fought on the right side still had support systems. Draco fought alone inside a moral fog. Childhood ended the moment survival became priority. That premature loss of innocence is one of the most heartbreaking aspects of his story. 10. He had no safe adult to guide him. One of the greatest differences between Draco and Harry was mentorship. Harry had Dumbledore, Sirius, Lupin, flawed but loving guides. Draco had ideology. Lucius offered expectation, not emotional refuge. Narcissa offered protection, but not moral redirection. No adult in Draco's life consistently challenged his prejudice with compassion. He was corrected politically, not ethically. When he struggled during 6th year, there was no trusted teacher he could confess to safely. Snape protected him strategically, but even that protection was entangled in larger plans. Draco did not have a space to unravel honestly. Children need adults who allow them to question inherited beliefs. Draco had adults who reinforced them. Without guidance, doubt becomes panic. He may have sensed that something was wrong, but lacked tools to process it. Moral courage often develops through modeling. Draco's models prioritized power. He learned how to command fear, not how to cultivate empathy. When crisis struck, he had no blueprint for healthy resistance. Imagine carrying unbearable pressure without a mentor's reassurance. His isolation deepened because vulnerability was never normalized. Adults failed him repeatedly. They used him, protected him selectively, but never truly liberated him. Guidance shapes destiny. Draco's guidance shaped imprisonment. And in that absence of safe leadership, his tragedy fully blooms. Draco Malfoy was not the hero of the story. But he was never the true villain either. He was something more realistic, a product of environment, fear, and pressure. His tragedy lies in potential. He could have been different. He could have chosen better, if he had been given space to grow without hatred shaping him first. While Harry represents chosen courage, Draco represents inherited darkness. And breaking free from inheritance is far harder than fighting an external enemy. In the end, Draco's lowered wand speaks louder than any spell cast in the series. That hesitation saved his soul, even if it didn't redeem his past. Draco Malfoy's sad story reminds us of something uncomfortable: not all antagonists are born monsters. Some are just children raised inside cages made of pride and fear.